Part 20. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 191. Knowing that Chen Tong was joking, Wang Ling didn't take it seriously. He smiled awkwardly, then shook his head and said, "Never mind that. Thank you very much this time." "How many times have you thanked me along the way, are you bothered?" Chen Tong responded angrily, and then stretched out, his expression a little more solemn. "This time, although the wolf team we have made great achievements, but our own losses are not small, and our eagle squad has also lost many brothers. During these days, we should rest and replenish our troops." Wang Ling nodded. This was exactly what he thought. Then Chen Tongke turned around, waved his hand back, and walked forward, saying, "Okay Wang Ling, you must be tired after fighting all night, so I won't bother you. I have more time for you, get some rest. Okay, let's go slowly without seeing you off." Seeing Chen Tong walking further and further until he disappeared from his sight, Wang Ling let out a sigh of relief. At this time, Sun Dehe came out of nowhere, looked at the direction Chen Tong left, and sneered, "Haha, Captain, you are still the best. This Chen Tong looked down on us before you came here. But now I take the initiative to make friends with you." Wang Ling smiled and shook his head. Instead of answering these words, he patted Sun Dehe on the shoulder. "Don't worry about him. We shouldn't have any tasks during this period. Let's rest." He, okay." Sun Dehe looked quite comfortable after retiring from the position of temporary captain. After staying up all night, fighting one after another, and traveling long distances, even with Wang Ling's physical strength and energy, he felt tired after the excitement period. However, he did not rest. Instead, he temporarily asked the base for a few anti-aircraft tracked vehicles and sent all the seriously injured members of the Wolf team to the field hospital in the rear of the base. These seriously wounded soldiers are basically new recruits and one-star veterans. They have no ability to heal themselves, and the temporary medical treatment methods on the battlefield are also very crude. They can only be sent to the hospital first, and then return to the battlefield after their injuries improve and their health bars are filled. In addition to the seriously wounded, there were also many minor injuries among the other recruits. However, Wang Ling did not let them go to the hospital. Instead, he personally applied medicine and bandages to them. With the help of these healing medicines, even if these soldiers did not have the ability to heal themselves, time would pass. It will heal over time. After all, there are never enough manpower on the battlefield. Those with minor injuries will not be sent directly to the hospital, and those with minor injuries will not be sent to the firing line. After all, the number of these wounded people was too much. Even with 2 donkeys to help Wang Ling, it took a lot of time to bandage them all. After bandaging, Wang Ling took the tanks of the Wolf team to the maintenance factory. In this battle, the tanks of the Wolf squad made great contributions, but after a long battle, the health of these tanks also lost too much. Although the tanks of the 3-star elite have the ability to self-heal, it takes time after all. As the main force of the Wolf team, it is best to have as much health as possible even during the recuperation period, otherwise it will be very dangerous if enemy intruder fighter planes explode. Wang Ling finally felt relieved after the tanks were repaired in the maintenance factory and their health was restored to full. The position of captain is not that easy to hold. He has been busy now and the sky has darkened. Wang Ling has basically done everything he should do. After dinner, it was rare that the Wolf squad was not assigned to patrols, and all the soldiers went to bed early. Wang Ling had a record of staying in Red Alert World for 2 consecutive days before, but during those days, he also had rest time in Red Alert World, so he did not feel tired. But today, for 2 days in a row, Wang Ling didn't rest. He was very tired now. He stretched out, washed briefly, then lay down on the hard bed in the military camp, and contacted Uncle He. Returned to the interdimensional system transfer station. Uncle Hay was still the same, congratulating with a smile, "Congratulations, you knocked down another Allied base and killed so many Allied soldiers. The number of points earned at once is quite huge." When the points were mentioned, Wang Ling became interested. Before Uncle Hay could take the initiative to talk about it, he started urging him, "Uncle Hay, please do the statistics. How many points did I get this time?" Uncle Hay nodded and started making statistics seriously. "Since the last statistics to now, you have lived in the red alert world for a total of 176 hours, accumulated 176 points, and killed 388 Allied soldiers of all types. 3,840 points, shot down 6 Invader fighter jets and 8 Black Hawk fighter jets, 580 points, annihilated a total of 113 enemy tanks of all types, 2,260 points, destroyed 37 various defense facilities, 1,850 points, destroyed 26 main Allied buildings, 2,600 points, in addition, force the Allied command post to self-destruct, and 100 points are also counted on your head. Add in your previous remaining 2,886 points, and now there are a total of 14292 remaining points. Points. That's quite a lot of points income. How much? More than 10,000 points at once." Wang Ling knew that he must have gained a lot of points this time, but when he heard the statistics of the points, he was also shocked. It's not like he has never done anything to promote the Allied base, but the number of points he gained in the past was far less huge than this time, and the points taken away by the Hound team were not included. Pushing an Allied base and earning more than 10,000 points at once, you can really see that the scale of this battlefield is far beyond the previous one. Uncle Hay chuckled and said, "Yes, this one-time income is enough for you to unlock an intermediate exchange again. But don't be so exaggerated. You will get a lot of points by turning down the Allied base, but don't forget, you have gone through several battles in succession before, and there are also encirclement and suppression troops that have been annihilated in the follow-up, which adds up to more than 10,000 points this time, so it is not too much." Wang Ling nodded and agreed with Uncle Hay's words. Previously, he invited the Wolf Squad to annihilate the attacking Allied squad, captured the oil production plant, besieged the Green Allied base for several days, pushed back the Allied base, and then fought a bloody battle with a large number of encirclement and suppression troops. These are all points. Without the supplement of these points, the points obtained from pushing Allied bases this time would have been severely reduced. However, there are not so many ifs. Anyway, I have already obtained the points, so do whatever you want. Thinking of this, Wang Ling didn't bother to think about it anymore. He yawned, twisted his neck, and complained, "The cost of pushing the Allied base is not small. I haven't slept in 2 days. I'm so sleepy all. Don't think about it so much now, let me go back to the real world, I want to sleep until midnight." Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 192. Uncle Hay didn't make things difficult for him. As soon as he finished speaking, Wang Ling's figure disappeared from the different dimension. Looking at the place where he disappeared, Uncle Hay also smiled particularly happily. This boy has become stronger and stronger in the world of Red Alert. The youthfulness at the beginning seems to have gradually faded away. How far will you develop in the future? Haha, I'm looking forward to it. After talking to himself, Uncle Hay's figure gradually disappeared. At the same time, all the light in the interdimensional system transfer station gradually disappeared, as if it quickly entered the night. In real life, after Wang Ling's consciousness returned, he suddenly opened his eyes. Although I stayed in the Red Alert world for 2 consecutive days, in reality I only spent less than 5 hours, and it was only the second half of the night. After regaining consciousness, Wang Ling did not rush to sleep. Instead, he opened his eyes and stared blankly at the upper bed board, his mind still filled with surprise at the 10,000 points. If all these more than 10,000 points were converted into cash, it would be worth more than 1 million. With this amount of points in hand, Wang Ling is now an invisible millionaire. However, these are just things to think about. Wang Ling is not in a hurry to use money now, and more than cash, Wang Ling wants to experience different arms and various strange abilities to obtain feedback from different dimensional systems. But they can't be bought with money. For example, right now, 10,000 points are enough for Wang Ling to switch arms again and receive the arm experience book. As for the conversion of arms, that is a matter for another time. For now, it is still necessary to upgrade the level of the magnetic blast infantry to the level of 10-star soldier king and obtain the weapons and abilities of the magnetic blast infantry. After looking away, Wang Ling let out a long breath and finally closed his eyes with peace of mind. After working hard for 2 days in the red alert world, Wang Ling was really tired now. It was exactly what Wang Ling said when he was in transit. He simply ignored the morning exercise the next day. Under the fatigue, he slept until midnight, and was not woken up by hunger until it was time to eat at noon. After getting up, he rubbed his stomach. Due to the long period of exercise, the abdominal muscles on his stomach were extremely obvious. Even if he didn't exert force deliberately, he could still see the distinct shape of his abdominal muscles. But Wang Ling didn't pay much attention to this. After waking up, he quickly got up, washed up, and went to the cafeteria to eat something. During this afternoon, Wang Ling's life was still the same as before. He stayed in the dormitory most of the time and only went to the classroom for a class. This kind of life was almost decadent and comfortable. And in the comfort, the afternoon passed quickly. After dinner, Wang Ling lay on the bed again at the fixed time, and his deep consciousness entered the world of red alert. The emergence of this extra-dimensional system, to put it bluntly, is to use the growth in the red alert world to help Wang Ling in reality. However, in real life, Wang Ling is in an ivory tower, but there is not much need for help, there are too many that I dare not write about. Even because of the home life, the cruelty of society cannot affect Wang Ling. In the end, this real life served as a buffer to the world of red alert. Although Wang Ling can now distinguish between reality and fiction, it is obvious that his main focus has been on the world of red alert. After a big battle, the Wolf team had established its position in the base and was in the post-war rest period. Even if there were no patrols that night, the other teams had no complaints. This battle also hurt the Allies, and all the large-scale troops dispatched were wiped out. It was difficult to organize a large-scale attack in a short period of time. Wang Ling slept very peacefully that night. When they woke up the next day, the Wolf team, like other members, had breakfast after a morning run, and arranged a few soldiers with full health to patrol. Then the others rested when they needed to, and were on alert when they needed to. There was no room for them on the battlefield. Too comfortable. As the captain of the Eagle Squadron, Wang Ling was no longer so nervous after his busy work yesterday. During the rest period, it is expected that the Wolf Squadron will not have any tasks for the time being. The rest is to wait for all the wounded to recover and regain strength. Compared to others, Wang Ling is relatively relaxed now. However, after all, after a great battle, an entire Allied base was overturned, and the balance of the battlefield was disrupted. The Wolf team had made great contributions, and it was somewhat difficult for Wang Ling to spend this period of time peacefully. When he was resting, captains of other teams would often come to visit and communicate. Although Wang Ling had no choice but to reach out and not hit the smiling person, he still talked to them politely without showing any airs. After receiving several captain-level figures, Wang Ling breathed a sigh of relief. After sending them back, he thought he would be able to settle down for a while. But, Wang Ling, come out, do you still want me to come in and find you? As soon as the captains were sent away, another one came up that was more difficult to serve. This voice seemed a little impatient and mixed with some teasing. Wang Ling couldn't help but frown slightly after hearing this. However, he did not get angry. Now that he is the Wolf Squad and Wang Ling, it is not easy for someone who dares to say such things to him. Thinking of this, Wang Ling took a deep breath and got out of the tent honestly. Only then did he see that the visitors outside were actually Captain Rovsky and Captain Xiaoping Wang. The person who spoke was naturally that Rovsky. Wang Ling was still relatively unfamiliar with this chief officer, so naturally he didn't recognize his voice. Seeing the two of them, Wang Ling immediately put away his previous displeasure, quickly performed a military salute, and said with a smile, "Two officers, what brought you here?" This can't be blamed on Wang Ling's reality. After all, the military hierarchy is strict. Wang Ling is not as good as the two in front of him in terms of position and military rank. He should be more cowardly. "What kind of wind could it be if I came here to find you?" Rovitsky responded angrily. It seems that he was forced to come here by Major General Liwiki. When facing Wang Ling, Rovitsky deliberately wanted to maintain his dignity and looked a little impatient. However, the curve of the corner of his mouth that he couldn't hold back also exposed it. His current state of mind. However, King Xiaoping was sincere and made it clear directly, "Congratulations to Wang Ling. This battle has pushed across an entire Allied base and disrupted the balance of the battlefield. You have made a great contribution. After consideration, General Liwiki decided to upgrade your military rank. And it's an improvement for the whole team." After saying that, Xiaoping Wang raised the hard-covered boxes in his hands, which contained the new rank epaulets of everyone in the Wolf Squad. And as he moved his hand, all the nearby members of the Wolf team showed expressions of ecstasy, staring at the epaulets without blinking. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 193. What do these soldiers in Red Alert desire most? Stay alive? Isn't that nonsense? Defeat the Allies and win the entire war? That's too far away. Talking about the recent desire, it is naturally to achieve great achievements, and the most direct manifestation of this military achievement is the promotion of military rank. Now that all members of the Wolf Squad have been promoted to military rank, can these soldiers not be excited? Some of the recruits even couldn't help but giggle. Their eyes gave people a lustful look, as if a super pervert saw a big girl without clothes. Although this metaphor is too crude, these new recruits after the war really feel this way. Not to mention them, even Wang Ling's breathing became a little heavier. After being promoted to the rank of sergeant, Wang Ling also realized more and more that it was not easy to upgrade the military rank. Moreover, the further you go, the harder it becomes and the more military exploits are required. Now, after successfully knocking down an entire Allied base, his military exploits finally allowed him to advance to the next level. But, Brother Zhao, didn't I promise before that even if I succeeded in knocking down the Allied base, I wouldn't want those military exploits? Why? Wang Ling still had some doubts in his heart. When he asked for the battle, Wang Ling was ruthless and would rather fight without merit. Now looking at his new military rank, he was a little confused for a moment. Rovitsky made a cut sound and said, "Isn't it a good thing to improve your military rank? Why are you so picky? Do you want General Liwiki to come and wear it for you in person before you accept it?" "Don't dare." Wang Ling shook his head quickly. King Xiaoping laughed and explained, "You promised, but whether you listen or not depends on the general's wishes. You really fought beautifully in this battle, and the impact on the base was not small. If anything, if you don't have any military exploits, wouldn't that chill the hearts of all the soldiers?" Wang Ling was stunned for a moment, but then he smiled helplessly. The thinking angle of these superiors always seemed to be taking care of the overall situation. With Wang Ling's current experience and achievements, it was difficult to guess what these superiors were thinking. However, no matter what, this military rank promotion is always a good thing, so Wang Ling stopped being pretentious. After a solemn military salute, he took over the new military ranks and the certificate of award with great care. Then Rovitsky said angrily, "Okay, I've completed the task. Let's go. There's no need to send it off." After saying that, Rovsky turned around very simply and strode away. Looking at his back, Wang Ling was a little stunned. This guy is so cool. Do I owe him something? Prince Xiaoping laughed dumbly and explained, "Don't be surprised, that's what he is like. Before you attacked the Allied base, he didn't think much of you, and he was slapped in the face in the end. Now he just can't keep his face down, pretending to be majestic. To put it bluntly, you just want to save face." When Wang Ling heard this, he suddenly understood, but he didn't take it seriously. He just smiled and said, "It's small things, just let him get used to it in the future." Such words were somewhat arrogant, and King Xiaoping couldn't help but click his tongue for a while after hearing this. However, such arrogant words coming from Wang Ling made him irrefutable. He has also seen many miracles from Wang Ling. However, there are still some beatings that should be made. Stop talking big words and just use actions to slap me in the face. "Yes, sir," Wang Linglao responded especially. Then Zhao Mingwang said, "I don't need to elaborate on how the military ranks should be distributed. You won't have any missions during these days. Just relax and rest for a while. You don't need to worry about the recruitment of soldiers. The Wolf team has made great contributions. The higher-ups won't treat you badly. Okay, there's nothing more to say. I'll leave first and look forward to your future performance." "Yes," Wang Ling responded more solemnly. After King Xiaoming left, the many soldiers of the Wolf Squad rioted and surrounded Wang Ling happily. Some were laughing and playing like a big boy, while others were flattering him. Although Wang Ling is the captain, he usually has no heirs. These soldiers are very happy with him. Even veterans such as Sun Dehu and Erlu dared to snatch the rank box from Wang Ling to watch. After being surrounded for a while, Wang Ling smiled and cursed, "You bastards, are you rebelling? You're looking for a beating." This group of people was noisy, but there was a limit. After being scolded, they briefly let off steam for a while, and finally got serious and handed the general rank back to Wang Ling. Now Wang Ling and Sun Dehu are wearing the epaulets with the rank of sergeant. If they are promoted to a higher level, they will only be second lieutenants. Others have not been promoted to lieutenants. Some recruits are not even sergeants. Naturally, there is no solemn ceremony. Investiture ceremony. However, Wang Ling still followed the old routine and held a brief meeting internally, solemnly putting each epaulet on the shoulders of these soldiers with his own hands. When Dai arrived at Sun Dehu's place, the fellow even laughed at him, "Captain, you are leading such a battle for nothing. In the end, your military rank is still the same as mine." Wang Ling glared at him angrily and cursed, but didn't take it seriously. "I just remember that when this guy was given a new military rank for the first time, Sun Dehu was so excited that he cried. Now that time has passed, he has gradually become accustomed to the feeling of being promoted, and he even dared to joke. Of course, in the Red Alert world, the highest level of this group of soldiers is only 3-star elites, but as time goes by, the mentality of this group of people is constantly changing and growing, and their experience and experiences are constantly enriched. These are quite valuable resources. After all the soldiers on the scene wore their military ranks, Wang Ling still had a lot left on hand, which belonged to the seriously injured recruits who were receiving treatment in the hospital. Wang Ling did not exclude this group of seriously injured people. After asking for instructions, he personally rode the Wolf team's anti-aircraft tracked vehicle to the field hospital, found the wounded members of the wolf team, and personally handed over their new military ranks to them. There are a large number of wounded in the hospital, but most of them are new recruits with very low military ranks. They are basically still privates, with a few upper-class soldiers. Watching the wounded members of the wolf team receiving their new military ranks in the hospital, each one of them looked envious. As for the wounded members of the wolf team, they were just like Sun Dehu back then, choked with excitement, and already somewhat incoherent when facing Wang Ling and his new rank. Wang Ling smiled, patted them on the shoulders one by one, and said comfortingly, "Don't be excited, where are you now? The war is still going on, and our road is still very far. The mountains that belong to us, no one can take it away. Before that, just rest in peace and recover as soon as possible, so that you can return to the battlefield as soon as possible and make more military exploits." After hearing this, these soldiers wiped away their tears one after another, and their eyes shone with confidence and perseverance. "I know, Captain." Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 194. On the battlefield of this Red Alert world, Wang Ling has become a veteran, and gradually knows how to mobilize the morale of the soldiers. With a few simple words, he can make those soldiers excited. The battlefield is constantly escalating, and the fighting will become more and more intense. Wang Ling is also growing in this turbulent battlefield. After the serious casualties were dealt with, the new military ranks of everyone in the Wolf Squad were finally distributed, and Wang Ling returned to the battlefield. The field hospital was located at the rear of the battlefield. Even relying on the speed of the anti-aircraft crawler vehicle, it took a lot of time to go back and forth. By the time Wang Ling returned to the battlefield, it was already night. The special treatment given to the wolf team did not last long. As the troops took turns and had dinner, detailed patrol arrangements were made, including Wang Ling. The original wolf squad was already strong, but in this base, their status was no different from other troops. But after this battle, the reputation of the wolf squad was completely destroyed. During the patrol, when they met members of other squads, they would also be greeted actively. The change was huge, but it was quite obvious that the members of the wolf squad, when patrolling, they all hold their heads high and their chests high, and their faces are shining. But others couldn't fault it. After all, this was the majesty of the wolf team with real swords and guns. Most of the patrols in the base are actually just symbolic. After all, there are radar signals and electronic maps. Unless they are spies, they can be clearly observed on the map. However, such are the habits and regulations, no one goes there. Resist anything. After the patrol, Wang Ling had nothing else to do, lay on the bed, returned to the real world, rested for a day, then returned to the Red Alert world, and fell asleep. In the early morning of this day, after having breakfast after a morning run, Wang Ling was observing the electronic map when he suddenly heard the sound of a large number of tank engines turning outside the camp, and then Zhao Pingguang's voice came out, "Wang Ling, come out and receive the message. Your wolf team's new tank." Upon hearing this, Wang Ling suddenly became excited and hurriedly got out of the tent. Outside the camp, King Xiaoping was looking at him with a smile on his face. Behind him were 3 Rhino tanks, an Apocalypse tank and an anti-aircraft crawler vehicle standing upright. They were placed together, emitting a steely air that was very dazzling. Looking at these tanks, Wang Ling was also a little happy, but he still suppressed the excitement and asked, "Brother Zhao, are these all ours?" King Xiaoping smiled lightly and nodded, "Yes, rewards based on merit. These are all rewards for your wolf team. What achievements they will have in the future depends on how you command them." "Haha, great, thank you." After receiving the confirmation, Wang Lingling was very happy. Although in this Red Alert world, Wang Ling valued soldiers more than tanks, and the wolf squad did not lose many tanks in the last battle, no one would mind having more troops. Moreover, it is undeniable that on this battlefield, the role of tanks is indeed greater than that of mobilization troops. These 3 Rhino tanks, an Apocalypse tank and an anti-aircraft crawler vehicle all have no level, but if used properly, their destructive power cannot be underestimated. After adding these tanks, the Wolf team now has 5 Rhino tanks, 3 Apocalypse tanks, and 3 anti-aircraft tracked vehicles. This strength and firepower are simply more than before the last battle. After delivering the tank, Zhao Pingwan casually said something to Wang Ling and then left. In the last battle, the Wolf squad lost more of their infantry. Naturally, the rewards above were not just tanks. 3 days later, the base dispatched hundreds of infantrymen from the barracks, and nearly 30 of them were organized. Under the command of the Wolf squad, there are even 2 magnetic blast infantry and 2 anti-aircraft infantry. If you add in the wounded who are recovering in the hospital, the number of people in the Wolf squad is simply larger than before the war started. As for the other recruits, some were assigned to the Eagle squad as a supplement, while the rest caught up with the expansion and were individually organized into a new squad. Originally, we wanted to have the Wolf squad send a 3-star elite to serve as the captain, but no one from the Wolf squad was willing to leave the team, which made Captain Rovik helpless. There was no choice but to borrow a 3-star elite from other established teams to lead the team. On the coalition side, when it comes to individual combat, the firepower of the mobilized soldiers is indeed inferior to that of the Allied soldiers, but they are better in numbers. There are many barracks in the rear of the battle line, and large-scale recruitment will occur from time to time. After a few months, after training, they are delivered to the battlefield. Although fighting alone cannot defeat the Allied forces, quantitative changes lead to qualitative changes. With more people, they will not be worse than the Allied forces in terms of firepower. This red alert world is, after all, a game world, which is very different from reality. And these soldiers are, to put it bluntly, virtual programs of the system. As long as the program settings are different from the reality, it is normal. After the team was expanded, in less than 3 days, all the soldiers of Wolf team who were originally sent to the hospital returned. When we went there, all of these people were seriously injured, and even if they were about to die if they were hit by a little more firepower, they were already recovering in the hospital in just a week or so. Not only these seriously injured people, but also the other lightly injured people in the Wolf team have also recovered to full health under the influence of medicine during these days. After resting for such a period of time, the wounds left behind by the war in the Wolf squad have been fully recovered, and their lineup is even more powerful than before the war. This also gave Wang Ling a lot of confidence. If you give him a certain amount of time, the remaining 3 Allied bases on the battlefield will be destroyed by him sooner or later. However, with the powerful defensive capabilities of the Allied base, this obviously cannot be accomplished overnight. Although the removal of one of the Allied bases destroyed the balance of the battlefield, the remaining 3 Allied bases are all difficult to chew and will take time to kill. In the next period of time, the 2 warring parties were still facing each other in a stalemate on the battlefield. However, it is different from before. In the past, there were 4 Allied bases, and they frequently launched attacks on the 2 Allied bases. However, the Allied forces could only hold on and occasionally send troops to attack. But now, the Allied base is missing, and so is the strength. When attacking, the troops are inevitably a bit weaker than before. It is difficult to effectively attack the Allied base, and they are often caught by the Allied forces. Opportunity to counterattack will result in a certain amount of losses every time. At the beginning, the imbalance was not too obvious, but as time went on, the imbalance became more obvious. Although there are only 2 coalition bases, the number of troops is sufficient. The coalition forces could still overwhelm them before. However, as time goes by, the coalition counterattacks become more and more fierce. In repeated exchanges of fire, the coalition forces are also overwhelmed. Less suffering, Overall, more losses than wins. There was even one occasion when all the defensive buildings at the entrance of the Orange Allied base were smashed, and the defensive troops were also annihilated. However, at the critical moment, the giant cannon inside the base was launched. After getting up, they successfully annihilated the attacking coalition team. Happy Mid-Autumn Festival to all book friends. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 195. This is a fiery battlefield, caused by a long period of fighting. Throughout the whole place, there are traces of potholes everywhere, which seems to indicate the war that has broken out here. Under the blue sky, there were occasional white clouds floating by, but they quickly moved away in the ensuing gust of wind, as if they were deliberately avoiding this battlefield. In a corner of this battlefield, there is an unexploited gold mine, covered with golden ore, which looks particularly bright under the sunlight. This mine also symbolizes the wealth during the war, but this wealth is obviously not so easy to obtain. Because, in this gold mine, there are now two terrifying robots that look like spiders crawling. These two terrifying robots had been waiting here for a long time, and finally slowly drove into a full-blooded Allied time-space mining vehicle within their active range, so they rushed forward unceremoniously and got closer to it. One of the terrifying robots succeeded first, pounced on the mining truck, and got into the body of the truck in the blink of an eye. The other terrifying robot reacted half a beat too late. Now that it had occupied its position, it did not give up and followed closely behind the mining vehicle. After being invaded by terrorist robots, this time-travel mining vehicle also suffered enough. The body would shake violently every once in a while, and every time it shook, the blood volume on its head would decrease by 1 point. Obviously, it was the terrifying robot that began to destroy it internally. However, the HP of this mining truck is too high, and the body is so strong that even if it is damaged internally, it will be difficult to destroy it for a while. While it is still strong, the mining truck is working hard to transport the minerals. After it was full, its blood volume had been reduced by more than 1/3. After enduring the destruction and mining for so long, the chrono mining vehicle finally no longer had to hold back. It chrono-traveled back to the Allied forces base in a swish, leaving only a wave trace of the chronomovement in its original position, as well as the terrifying robot was thrown out. Similar scenes can be said to happen from time to time throughout this battlefield. It has been nearly a month since the Wolf Squad and the Hound Squad worked together to annihilate an Allied base. In the past month, the imbalance on the battlefield has become more and more obvious. The number of times the Allied forces have sent out troops to attack the Allied bases has become less and less. On the contrary, it has given the Allied forces many opportunities to attack the Allied bases frequently. But these are only harassments by small-scale troops. After all, the decisive battle has not yet come. During this period, the two coalition bases also realized the wonderful harassment effect of terrorist robots, so they dispatched at least one terrorist robot on this battlefield, especially in each mine. Whenever an Allied mining vehicle approached, they will take the initiative to attack, and even Allied troops close to here will be targeted. In the past few days, many Allied mining trucks have been murdered. Although the war has reached this stage, the Allies have robbed too many minerals and accumulated a lot of combat funds, but as long as the war continues, these funds will be exhausted sooner or later. Minecarts suffered one after another, and the Allied military could not hold back from time to time and sent tanks or infantry to destroy these terrifying robots. For example, right now, these two terrorist robots are being targeted by the Allied forces. Two multifunctional infantry vehicles and 3 Grizzly tanks have been dispatched in an attempt to encircle and suppress them. Among them, the 2 multifunctional infantry vehicles are naturally the fastest, and they want to be the first to attack after arriving at the mine. But the speed of its attacking missiles was really not fast enough. The 2 vehicles fired 2 rounds at the same time. Just after destroying one of the terrorist robots, the other one quickly approached and then directly pounced and got into the interior of the infantry vehicle. Then the destruction begins. This multifunctional infantry vehicle does not have enough armor and health, and in order to be fast enough, its body is too light, and it cannot even crush ordinary infantry. As a result, with every destruction of the terrorist robot, this multifunctional infantry vehicle would swing violently every time, with the amplitude even exceeding 45 degrees. If it were any more exaggerated, it might overturn. As the infantry vehicle swayed every time, the health bar on its head would be greatly reduced. After 5 or 6 times in a row, the blood volume finally ran out, and then exploded, revealing the terrifying robot inside. However, as soon as the robot appeared, it didn't even wait for another multi-purpose infantry vehicle to react. It pounced again and got into the vehicle, causing another round of destruction. While the second infantry vehicle was being destroyed, the 3 Grizzly tanks finally approached. However, they should never have come here at this time. As a result, after the infantry vehicle exploded, the terrorist robot got directly into a Grizzly tank nearby. This speed was so fast that those Grizzly tanks only had time to shake the barrel before losing their target. As a result, all 3 Grizzly tanks were killed one after another by a terrifying robot. And here, it was just a corner of the battlefield. Some of the encirclement and suppression tanks lost their targets after the terrorist robots entered their bodies, and simply returned to the base. With luck, the tank had just exploded, exposing the traces of the robot and being blown up by Allied soldiers. The visible range of the crack generator had just been detected and then covered up again. But some unlucky ones didn't know it and instead got close to other tanks. As a result, a terrifying robot disturbed the inside of the Allied base and caused a lot of chaos. A large number of tanks were finally killed when they attacked the soldiers. Naturally, after being passive for so long, the Allied forces would hold their breath and launch some attacks, but each time they would be swallowed up and annihilated by the coalition forces at a very small cost. As time passed, the Allied forces became less focused on the offensive. Instead, they targeted the oil production plants occupied by the Allied forces, and would send troops to attack from time to time. For example, right now, there are 5 Grizzly tanks, 2 multi-purpose infantry vehicles, and more than 20 Allied soldiers, rushing toward an oil production plant in a menacing manner. However, after observing its movements from the map, the base has already dispatched troops to deal with it, and this troop is the Wolf Squad that the Allied forces hate with gnashing of teeth. In this month, although the two sides fought frequently, the total time was not reached after all, and the Wolf team was rarely used. It only guarded the base a few times. As time went by, Wang Ling became a little unwilling. Now this action was the result of Wang Ling's initiative to fight. The firepower of the Wolf Squad was so fierce that it could even push across the Allied base. It was natural to deal with these sudden Allied troops. Not long after the war started, all the Allied troops were annihilated by the Wolf Squad. Looking at the corpses of the Allied soldiers that were gradually disappearing, Wang Ling frowned slightly and picked his chin. The Allies can only go with the wind but not against it? Isn't it just that there is one less Allied base? Why are these days don't even dare to attack? At this scale, how can I earn points and level up? Yes, during these days, the Wolf Squad had almost no use. It participated in very few battles. Wang Ling's points were also slowed down too much. He could not even reach the level of 10-star Soldier King in a month. Naturally, he felt that there are complaints. However, when he looked at the Allied base on the map, he could only shake his head. The Allied base seemed to have been planning something these days and was reluctant to launch a general attack. Wang Ling had no choice. However, just when the blocking battle was over and Wang Ling was about to return to the base, Zhao Pingguang's voice suddenly came over the radio. "Wang Ling, I have been having a lot of leisure these days, but the Wolf Squad's combat effectiveness is still there. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 196. Don't worry, Brother Zhao, the firepower is just as strong as before. However, no matter how powerful the firepower is, it must be put to use. Wang Ling finally found a chance and complained. After hearing this, King Xiaoming laughed a few times. I guess you are a little impatient. But this time, it is difficult for you to stay safe. The higher UPS followed Chen Tong's suggestion and have decided on a large-scale attack plan. You Wolf, the team also wants to participate. Oh. When Wang Ling heard this, he became interested. After such a long stalemate, was there finally going to be a large-scale attack? But Chen Tong's suggestion? Is it reliable? Wang Ling obviously had some doubts about the captain of the Eagle Squad. Although Wang Ling knew from the conversation a long time ago that Chen Tong did have some tactical acumen, he was the programmer of the system after all. As a player, Wang Ling was naturally not too reassured. But King Xiaoping was not happy anymore. He sneered and said sarcastically, "Hey, what's the matter? Wang Ling, you're swollen. You, the boss, are you the second child? Only your method will work, but no one else's will work? Don't underestimate Chen Tong. His military rank is not as high as yours, but his qualifications on the battlefield are far above yours." Wang Ling curled his lips, somewhat disapproving. No matter how senior you are, it is still programmed, and your tactics will inevitably be a bit rigid. Of course, Wang Ling still can't believe it. However, he did not express this distrust anymore. Instead, he asked, "What is the specific tactic?" Originally, this tactical arrangement needed to be kept secret, but who asked the Wolf Squad to participate, and Wang Ling's Wolf Squad played an important role in it? King Xiaoming thought of this, so he didn't hide anything. He told Wang Ling in detail the tactical arrangements that Chen Tong handed over the radio. After Wang Ling heard this, his eyes suddenly lit up. What a great idea! Wang Ling couldn't find anything wrong with this tactic. After listening to it, he couldn't help but feel interested in Chen Tong. It seems that these programs created by the system also have their merits. However, when it came to the detailed arrangements, Wang Ling showed his stubbornness. But Brother Zhao, in terms of this arrangement, why does it seem like my wolf team is playing support? This arrangement is very unpleasant. Moreover, they chose that base seems to be quite difficult to attack. Even if the wolf team goes to attack it, they will have to pay a heavy price. With these questions, Zhao Pingwang was not surprised. He explained in a straight and clear manner, "It is because it is difficult to bite, so we have to unite multiple teams to attack together, and it is an unexpected surprise attack. There are naturally many risks in doing so, and a strong team is required. Our team helps them block those risks. Think about it, besides your wolf team, who else is qualified for this task?" As he spoke, a tall hat was placed on Wang Ling's head invisibly. Although what Prince Xiaoping said was true, Wang Ling couldn't help but grin after hearing this. He, Wang Ling, is not a saint. On the contrary, he is very down to earth. Although he can hear such words, he does not reject them. Instead, he chuckles and says, "That's right. If you say that, then leave this task to us. Okay, when the large army sets off, you can go out and join them." Okay. After the radio was interrupted, in the command post of the coalition base, Zhao Pingwang helplessly shook his head, but Rovsky snorted and said, "Wang Ling is really rude and not humble at all." Zhao Mingwang shrugged his shoulders again, non-committal, but Major General Li Wiki smiled, "That's a bit rude, but it can also be seen that Wang Ling is more sincere and unpretentious." On the battlefield, next to the oil field, Wang Ling didn't know that his casual response would trigger some discussion among the officers in the command post. After the communication was interrupted, Wang Ling stretched himself fiercely, with intense war in his eyes. Meaning. Finally, there is another large-scale battle. This time, it is not known how many points will be gained, and whether the magnetic blast infantry can be successfully promoted to the level of 10-star soldier king. Beside him, Sun Dehuo, Li Tong and others looked at Wang Ling's changes and glanced at each other. Finally, Erlu said, "Captain, what is it that makes you so arrogant? Show off." When Wang Ling heard this, he immediately glared over, resisted the urge to kick him, and simply relayed the mission and what Zhao Pingwang said to them. Not surprisingly, after hearing these words, all the sticks of the wolf team floated up. Yes, yes, no other team can complete this mission except us. Not only is it impossible to complete, there is even a possibility of being counterattacked. Ahem, don't be so absolute. Although other teams are not as good as ours in combat effectiveness, if several teams join together, it is still possible to complete it. These cheap players were really arrogant one after another, even worse than Wang Ling. Wang Ling was beaten for a while, and he quickly scolded them before beating them down. The rest of the time was spent waiting for the actions of the large forces in the base. These days, the wolf team has spent a lot of time recuperating. Although it is boring, they have also become accustomed to it. The waiting now is naturally not a problem. After being stationed next to the oil production plant for several hours, the teams in the two coalition bases finally completed preparations, quickly assembled, and then left the base under the leadership of their respective captains. The goal of this attack is to overthrow an allied base again, so the scale of the operation is naturally quite large. It was observed from the electronic map that the coalition base where Wang Ling was located dispatched two teams, the Eagle Squad and the Tiger Squad, with Chen Tong and Hu Ben leading the teams respectively. At the other coalition base, the people dispatched were all old acquaintances. The Hound team and the Firefox team, Sun Chiming and Dongming were also running at the front of the team. After this period of development, the Hound team has obviously completely recovered its vitality. Moreover, it has made great achievements in pushing down the Allied base last time. It is obvious that the above has also given a lot of rewards. The size of the team is even more powerful than the last time they attacked. Point. The four teams came out together, and the scene was quite lively. Four obvious torrents of red steel could be clearly seen on the electronic map, which were menacing, mighty and domineering. In the past few days, although the Allied forces have attacked from time to time, they have been small-scale harassment. Now that such a large-scale team is dispatched at once, the three Allied bases will become nervous. But what happened to them, Wang Ling obviously didn't care much now. When he observed the movements of the troops from all directions, Wang Ling also smiled brightly. After waiting for so long, it finally begins. Wolf Squad, take action. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 197. Across. On this turbulent battlefield, there are troops from all directions running around in a mighty manner. The total number of soldiers in these four troops was nearly 300. The fiery fighting spirit spurted out, making the entire team full of momentum, and the iron hooves stepped across it, as if the entire battlefield was trembling. At the rear of the army, a large number of tanks followed slowly, many of which contained some powerful weapons. Under the dark barrels, it seemed that the destructive power of thunder was hidden, and they were looking forward to a fierce battle. These four troops are naturally the Eagle Squad, Tiger Squad, Hound Squad, and Firefox Squad that were dispatched from the coalition base. According to Chen Tong's tactical arrangement, these four troops will join forces in the next general attack. Fighting. The march of a large army is inevitably a bit slow, and even various tanks and vehicles have been ordered to follow the rear of the army and are not allowed to advance first to avoid being singled out. At this speed, the troops from all directions moved forward with iron hooves. After more than half a day, they finally arrived at the broken bridge. After Wang Ling ordered the bridge to be blown up last time, in the past few days, the armies of both sides have never repaired it. They have been using another bridge. Naturally, there are only a few bridges left on the broken bridge now. Traces of the aftermath of World War II. In front of the broken bridge, the troops from all directions converged and finally stopped. Dongming pointed to the broken bridge and said to Sun Chiming with a smile, "Look at your masterpiece last time." Sun Chiming also smiled very proudly, "Haha, yes, I still remember it fresh. I have to say, Captain Wang is really powerful and flexible. I still remember those Allied tanks after destroying the bridge. They look so anxious, piled up here, and why can't they get through?" "Exactly, look at the person who gave you to the cow, it's like you interrupted it yourself," Dongming started sarcastically, but Sun Chiming just smiled happily and was not surprised. Hu Ben stared at the broken bridge for a long time, then shook his head and said with a smile, "This approach is really unreasonable, but it is also in line with the temperament of brother Wang Ling. The instructions and tactics are tricky and effective. So far, there are no results. Many Allied bases fell into his trap." This time, Dongmingdu nodded in rare agreement and agreed with Hu Ben's statement. Chen Tong then smiled slightly, "Heroes don't mention how brave they were in the past. This is already a thing of the past. What we have to do next will be no worse than what you did last time." Yes, the attack plan planned by Captain Chen is indeed cunning. After this battle, I'm afraid Captain Chen's reputation will surpass Captain Wang's again, Dongming said happily, although he may have meant the same thing. "What I think in my heart, but it always sounds like a flattery." After hearing this, Chen Tong raised the corners of his mouth slightly and smiled confidently. Although the conflict with Wang Ling had been resolved long ago, he exuded a kind of arrogance in his bones, so naturally he still wanted to compete with Wang Ling. After finishing chatting, Chen Tong waved back, and the engineer who was sitting peacefully on the anti-aircraft crawler truck also jumped off the command, then looked at the control device next to the bridge and ran over, and in an instant the entire bridge was repaired and the engineer was never seen again. Looking at the repaired bridge, Chen Tong let out a sigh of relief. "Now, everything is ready, all we need is the east wind. Across. Across. Not long after he finished speaking, there was suddenly a faint sound of footsteps on one side of the quartet troops. Following the sound, there was another team like a torrent of steel coming from afar at the end of the line of sight. This team also has a large number of people, and most of them are 3-star elites. The uniform marching pace and the straight backs of the soldiers seem to declare the morale and fighting spirit of this team. Behind the group of soldiers, the tanks were also following unhurriedly. Among them, the 2 3-star elite level killers, the Apocalypse tanks, seem to be particularly dazzling. The number and size of a team is naturally inferior to that of 4 teams combined, but the morale and tyranny of such a team are not weaker than those of the 4 armies as a whole, which is shocking to see. And this team is naturally the wolf team that came slowly from the oil production plant. At the front, Wang Ling led the wolf squad, from far to near. After approaching the troops from all directions, they all stopped with a powerful step, followed by a standard military salute. After Chen Tong and the others returned the greeting, they laughed, "I'm just waiting for you. Without you in this plan, we won't be able to attack the Allied base without worry." Wang Ling smiled confidently and patted his chest, "Put it on me. We are blocking it. We will not miss any reinforcements that break out." "Good." Chen Tong's eyes seemed to glow slightly, and he opened his mouth to reveal his white teeth. "Now, all the teams have been assembled, the soldiers are united, and the generals are fighting together. Brothers, let's set off." This general offensive plan was originally submitted by Chen Tong, and the temporary commander-in-chief of the 5 armies naturally fell on Chen Tong. Roar! With the shouts of all the soldiers, the assembled 5 troops finally set off in a mighty manner. They lined up across the bridge in an orderly manner, then targeted the farthest blue Allied base and headed off. The 5 troops marched, which caused quite a shock. The 3 allies were oppressed by its momentum. As if they were facing a formidable enemy, the commanders frequently used radios to communicate urgently. But the 5 troops didn't care at all. Under the mighty march, they gradually approached the blue Allied base and parked near it in the middle of the night. At this distance, a large force could reach it in half an hour at most with a single charge, as if they were approaching the city. But tonight they did not launch an attack rashly. Instead, they camped on the spot, apparently intending to spend the night here. But even if there was no attack, the blue Allied base still felt like it was facing a formidable enemy, and it quickly sent a signal for help to the other 2 Allied bases. In the past few days, as the Wolf Squad and the Hound Squad overturned an Allied base, the imbalance on the battlefield has become more and more serious. The originally strong Allied forces have gradually fallen behind and become more passive during these days. And it is precisely because of this passive pressure that the 3 Allied bases have become more and more vigilant, and their connections have become closer and closer. It is difficult for one party to provide support to both parties. After receiving the signal for help, a large number of troops left the Orange Allied base and the Green Allied base overnight, keeping a certain distance from the coalition forces, and entered the Blue Allied base via the path up the mountain. Looking at this, it is obvious that they are gathering their strength together to fight against the enemy. From the map, it was seen that the strength of the blue base was soaring, but the 5 captains ignored it at all, and even had a faint smile on their lips. Obviously, this approach of the Allies had long been within their expectations. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 198. Tisk, tisk, I really made you guess. These 3 Allied bases have already gathered together to keep warm. After the Allied forces arrived at the Blue Allied base with overnight support, Dongming couldn't help but sigh. Chen Tong smiled confidently, now that we are strong, they have to unite, otherwise we will easily divide our forces and annihilate them. The 3 Allied bases are already very passive. If another one is destroyed, we are under an absolute headwind. After Huben put down the electronic video, he also mocked, this Blue Allied base is really full of soldiers. But it just so happens that if they don't unite to support us, it will be difficult for us to implement our plan. Sun Chiming was also quite proud, haha, I am already looking forward to what the expressions of these allies will be like when we launch the attack tomorrow. Listening to the conversation between the 4 of them, Wang Ling did not interrupt, but could not help but roll his eyes. Although the mission of the Wolf team is no less important than theirs tomorrow, they will not participate in the general attack after all. Listening to their discussions, I naturally felt a little unhappy. It is now late at night in the Red Alert world. After the troops were stationed, there was no large-scale deployment of troops. They just arranged for rotating personnel, and then others fell asleep in batches so that they could rest more before the war. Energy. Wang Ling was no exception. He closed his eyes, returned to the real world and rested for a day before returning. He slept with the troops until dawn the next day before waking up. After all the members of the 5 armies had eaten breakfast and cheered up, Chen Tong waved his hand, the allies must have been worried enough this night, and they are also tired now. Our opportunity has come. Everyone, pay attention, as planned act, let's go. Following Chen Tong's order, the large troops finally set off collectively. However, to the surprise of the Allies, these 5 troops did not attack the Blue Allied base. Instead, they collectively changed their direction and rushed towards the Orange Allied base with great momentum. Originally, The Allied forces were nervous when they saw the large coalition forces starting to take action. However, as the coalition forces left en masse, this group of people suddenly became confused. The large forces in the 3 Allied bases have been assembled and are ready to attack at any time. Is this guy so good that he won't fight if he says he won't? Wrong. After this confusion lasted for a period of time, the top Allied forces finally noticed something was wrong. The large coalition forces were not retreating, but were shifting positions and heading towards another Allied base. These large Allied troops who came overnight were clearly fooled. Thinking of this, the Allied forces were furious, but in their anger, they were also a little scared. The large defensive forces are concentrated in the blue Allied base, but the other 2 bases are a bit empty. Damn it, come back quickly. Hurry up, retreat, hurry up. Damn, their goal is not here. Thinking of this, the commanders finally lost their composure and hurriedly commanded the large forces to retreat. Even the soldiers in the blue Allied base later organized groups of combat forces, ready to support the orange Allied base at any time. Yes, this was the attack plan that Chen Tong had drawn up earlier. The troops were at the city gates all night, but the next day they suddenly changed their target and attacked another Allied base. This method was used by Wang Ling on the previous battlefield, but it was just to tease the Allies and had no real effect. But at the moment, Chen Tong's approach is really cunning. This night stationing has put strong pressure on the blue Allied base. He asked for help overnight and dispatched a large number of troops from the other 2 bases. Now although there are defenders in the 2 bases, their defenses are not as good as before, and the interior is so empty. However, Chen Tong had already targeted this gap and led several teams to attack together. This was enough to scare the Allies. Chen Tong was tricked into tricking the tiger away from the mountain. Even Wang Ling couldn't help but praise him after hearing it. Some of the virtual characters created by these systems are also worthy of attention. As for the Allied forces, they are naturally shocked and angry now. The original rescue teams have withdrawn from the blue Allied base one after another. However, because there are too many of them, they cannot retreat all at once. There are even soldiers and tanks from both sides. They compete with each other and block one side of the road, which can be said to be a fool's errand. However, even if these teams really left the blue Allied base in an orderly manner, they might not be able to rush to the orange base, because after the joint team marched for a while, the wolf team led by Wang Ling suddenly broke away and stopped. Came down and quickly deployed across the rear of the combined team to fend off these belated Allied forces. Although they did not participate in the frontal surprise attack, the task of the wolf team was not easy, and it might even be more dangerous than Chen Tong and the others. After all, what they faced could be said to be large forces from 3 Allied bases, and they had to resist these with the strength of a small team. Once the wolf squad falls and Allied reinforcements are released, the joint squad will be attacked from both inside and outside. Not to mention being able to successfully push away the Allied base, its own casualties will also surge. By then, it will be able to whether or not to break out is a question. Precisely because this task was crucial to whether the joint team could capture the Allied base, Chen Tong and General Li Wiki thought about it for a long time and found that only the wolf team was the most suitable for this task, and only they could complete it. After Wang Ling learned the details of the task, he could also realize the importance of the task. Although he complained, he still resolutely accepted it in the end. After the joint team gradually moved away and gradually left the sight range, Wang Ling had time to observe the electronic map, then glanced at all members of the wolf team, and shouted in a deep voice, "Brothers, another tough battle is coming. Our position is very important. Only if we can resist the Allied reinforcements can the joint forces successfully attack the city. The number of enemies is much greater than ours. Do you have the confidence to defeat them?" "Yes, yes, yes." After resting for such a long time, All the members of the Wolf Squad had long wanted to have another hearty battle. After hearing Wang Ling's words, the whole team shouted in unison. The sound was so loud that it even stung slightly. Wang Ling's eardrum was damaged. Wang Ling nodded with satisfaction at the Wolf team's response, then turned around and faced the direction of the Blue Allied base. Tune the tiger away from the mountain? Now that you've been transferred, don't think about going back. Just kill one of these tigers. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 199. At this stage of the war, the three Allied bases on this battlefield are naturally not in a hurry. If one more base is pushed down, the remaining two Allied bases will not be able to make a comeback. Of hope. In addition, the coalition forces are now strong and the coalition team has a strong lineup, so they have to be sensitive. Although a lot of fools were made when evacuating the Blue Allied base, and even after the Wolf team was deployed, two small roads were still blocked, but a large number of reinforcements had already poured out on the main road. These reinforcements include three color troops, representing three coalition bases respectively. The types of troops are quite mixed and the number is quite large. However, because they were too anxious after all, these withdrawn reinforcements had no time to wait for other troops, so they successively used their fastest speeds to try to support the Orange Allied base. Due to the speed difference, these Allied troops are now also dispersed into several speed echelons, weakening their charging formation. But Wang Ling also likes to see them in such a hurry. If all the arms really come together to launch an attack, the Wolf team will be very embarrassed and passive. Normally, the fastest among the Allied forces are multifunctional infantry vehicles, but this time there are some exceptions. The ones rushing at the front of the Allied reinforcements turned out to be nearly 20 rocket pilots. It makes sense to think about it. Even if the main road is not blocked, with so many reinforcements going out together, it will inevitably be a bit crowded. It is normal that the multi-purpose infantry vehicle cannot rush out first. The rocket pilots are an air combat arm, so if they are blocked again, it will be outrageous. Seeing these rocket pilots approaching from the electronic map, Wang Ling also laughed arrogantly, waved his hand, and under his arrangement, 3 anti-aircraft crawlers and 2 anti-aircraft infantry immediately got to the front of the team. After getting into position, there was a short wait before these rocket pilots finally arrived. "Down with me, don't let anyone go," Wang Ling shouted loudly. Although he couldn't attack air targets, his momentum was stronger than that of an anti-aircraft tracked vehicle. After receiving the order, the air defense team immediately opened fire. This air defense team includes 2 3-star elite-level air defense tracked vehicles. Their lethality and efficiency against infantry are very significant. Under the splash damage, large areas of those rocket pilots were disrupted and attacked, and they immediately changed their targets. Tried to counter-attack the anti-aircraft crawler vehicles, but after they entered the range, they only hit one of the 3-star elites with half health, and they were all shot down. The falling white figures looked like they were dropping dumplings. With nearly 20 rocket pilots, the ungraded anti-aircraft tracked vehicle naturally gained a lot of experience. When the last rocket pilot was shot down, it was successfully promoted to a 1-star veteran. The first firing squadron was shot down, followed by 8 invader fighter planes from 2 Allied bases. Due to their geographical location, these 8 fighter jets were not at the same distance from the Eagle squadron. Wang Ling seized the opportunity and had 3 anti-aircraft crawler vehicles intercept the 4 fighter jets closest to them halfway, and shot them all down with artillery shells. Then he quickly returned to his original position and cooperated with 2 anti-aircraft infantry to intercept the other 4. This process seems quite rushed. The Wolf Squad's anti-aircraft crawler vehicles are very powerful, but their number is too small after all. if the 8 invader fighter planes are not too far apart from each other, giving the crawler vehicles enough time, otherwise they might have to miss some of it. After successfully dealing with 8 fighter jets, the 1-star veteran's tracked vehicle was finally promoted to 3-star elite. Even one of the anti-aircraft infantry gained experience and was successfully promoted to 3-star. The first battle was successful, but Wang Ling could not relax at all. The number of these vanguard troops was only a small part compared to the entire reinforcements. The real hard battle was still to come. After the air support troops were dealt with, it was finally the turn of the ground troops. This time, the one that rushed forward was finally replaced by a multifunctional infantry vehicle that Wang Ling was familiar with. Although they were rushed out in a hurry, the number of these infantry vehicles that arrived was quite large, more than 10. Wang Ling, however, was not worried at all about this. Instead, he felt a fighting spirit in his heart. When the infantry vehicle approached, he shouted, and a brilliant electromagnetic current was launched directly in front of him. Although this electromagnetic current is brilliant, the power hidden under the splendor is enough to frighten people. Although the multifunctional infantry vehicles in that area are unevenly distributed, 3 of them were covered by electricity in one breath, and their heads were covered with blood. The volume was greatly reduced in an instant. Once the attack was successful, Wang Ling launched subsequent attacks, firing electromagnetic currents one after another. The 3 infantry vehicles were destroyed by Wang Ling before they could hold on for more than a few breaths. Taking advantage of this time, the remaining multifunctional infantry vehicles finally rushed into the fire range of the Wolf team. As a result, the Apocalypse tanks, Rhino tanks, and a considerable number of soldiers all exploded with extremely powerful firepower in an instant. With so much firepower, no matter how fast the remaining infantry vehicles were, they could not break through the blockade of the Wolf squad, and were all blown up before they could even counterattack. The infantry vehicles were successfully annihilated, but the members of the Wolf squad could not relax at all. They were still in a highly tense state of combat readiness. The Allied reinforcements were far more than that. Taking advantage of this warning gap, Wang Ling also took the time to check the electronic map, and when he saw it, his expression became quite exciting. Because the Allied troops behind are simply a hodgepodge. Because this support was too sudden and urgent, the 3 Allied forces did not care too much. After squeezing out of the blue Allied base, they focused on charging. As a result, various types of tanks with unequal speeds were piled up together. Grizzly tanks, phantom tanks, and even multifunctional infantry vehicles, etc., were mixed and matched. Their number exceeded 10. More than 30 tanks swept through collectively, and the scene was quite huge. Looking from a distance, it looked like a torrent of mottled steel, which gave people a numbing feeling. Wow, this is a big meal, Wang Ling rubbed his forehead, and after his headache passed, he showed a sly smile. However, the bigger the meal, the more worth savoring. These tanks have a lot of points and experience it. It is true that the torrent of steel is indeed scary, but in Wang Ling's eyes, it seems like a pile of points surging. Moreover, Wang Ling is confident that the Wolf team is strong enough to score the points. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 200. Quick, hurry up, the Wolf squad is working hard to stop the reinforcements for us, we can't let the chain slip. While Wang Ling and the Wolf team were preparing intensively for the battle, preparing to face the modeled tank army, the quartet troops headed by Chen Tong were not idle either. After such a long and urgent march, the quartet troops finally gradually approached the Orange Allied Forces base. After the army finally assembled and stabilized, Chen Tong stared at the base with fiery eyes, waved his hand, and shouted, "Brothers, charge and level this base." Roar! The troops from all directions suddenly let out a deafening roar, with overwhelming momentum. As the charge horn sounded, the large forces finally began a general attack on the Orange Allied base according to the pre-arranged arrangements. At the front were dozens of mobilization recruits. After the mobilization, there were 4 captains including Chen Tong and all the tanks. Behind them, there was a large infantry group. Wang Ling likes to use tanks as shields to reduce team casualties, but for other captains, the value of tanks is much higher than that of infantry. They would rather use infantry to attract firepower and serve as cannon fodder than to protect the tanks, so he with the scene now. The team's charging speed was very fast. At full speed, they rushed up the hillside within a few minutes. At this time, the 2 light prism towers finally began to shoot in line. The light prism tower is extremely powerful and is almost a fatal threat to ordinary infantry, not to mention the connection of 2 towers to extend the range and increase the power. Any infantryman who was shot would be killed in an instant. During the charge, 4 soldiers died one after another. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the vanguard of the quartet's forces finally approached the outermost edge of the Orange Allied base, and then without saying a word, opened fire on the 2 machine gun bunkers. The machine gun bunker also erupted fire snakes at the same moment, and together with the light prism tower resisted the coalition's attack. Not only that, even inside the base, many soldiers and tanks were temporarily stationed at this intersection and deployed to fight with these defensive buildings. Although most of the troops were mobilized away from the mountain, some resistance forces were left. Now the base can only rely on these forces to fight. When these fire powers are gathered together, the power cannot be underestimated. Some of the mobilized soldiers in front are sacrificed almost all the time. Once the war starts, tragic sacrifices become inevitable. While these mobilization troops were attracting firepower, the tanks and large troops from the rear finally arrived one after another. As a result, the tapping of submachine guns became as frequent as the sound of rain, mixed with a large number of the sound of cannon fire. The original vanguard force was somewhat weak before these resistance forces, but with the arrival of these large forces, the sudden increase in strength directly overwhelmed all resistance. Under the suppression of powerful firepower, all defenses at the intersection were suppressed. All the buildings were bulldozed in a short time, and even the defensive Allied troops at the intersection were suppressed by the dense fire snakes and all annihilated. After tearing this gap open, the troops from all sides finally lost their scruples and rushed into the interior of the Allied base with shouts and momentum. Most of the troops within the Allied forces were mobilized, and the remaining forces were obviously not enough to resist the forces from all 4 directions. All the resistance forces that came later were wiped out. This magnanimous charge also made the troops from all directions soar with pride, just like wolves among sheep. However, just when they were about to launch an offensive and destroy the base, they only heard a loud boom from deep inside the base, followed immediately by a deafening explosion from the vanguard of the quartet's troops. At the same time, 4 infantrymen who were close together were killed instantly. The sensation caused by the strong explosion made even the mountain top seem to be shaking. An exaggerated scene suddenly appeared in the bombed place of deep pit. This sudden situation also shocked Chen Tong and several other captains. Looking at the bombing that just appeared, they all felt a sense of horror in their hearts. This power is really terrifying. As for the thing that fired this shell, it was naturally the Allied cannon. This kind of thing was worthy of being a weapon for defending the city. Even Wang Ling was very afraid of it. Without effective countermeasures, he launched a forceful attack. The number of casualties in the team will definitely be a terrifying figure. Chen Tong had rich combat experience. He had heard Wang Ling talk about it before, and now he naturally knew what was bombarding them. From the electronic map, he could even see that his position was temporarily exposed under the crack generator due to the firing of artillery shells. Big cannon. With this kind of thing, the coalition's attack will be strongly suppressed. This is not what he wants to see. He immediately screamed, "Turn off the power. Cut off the power to this base. Quick, turn off all nearby power plants demolished." Yes, This giant cannon is extremely powerful and has an extremely long range, but it also consumes a terrifying amount of power. Moreover, it is located deep inside the Allied base. It is simply unrealistic to attack it by force, and there are no air troops, so it is just can cut off its power supply. Once the power is cut off, the giant cannon will become a display just like power-consuming devices such as prism towers, spy satellites, and crack generators. This kind of targeting method was also what Wang Ling told him during the previous conversation. It was by relying on this targeting method that Chen Tong had the confidence to lead the troops from all directions to storm this allied force with giant cannons. Base. And just as the four forces stormed the Allied base and prepared to forcibly dismantle the power plant under the threat of giant artillery, the original proposer of this method, Wang Ling, was now leading the Wolf Squad to block the other two Allied forces. On the route. After such a long wait, the torrent of steel composed of those tanks finally gradually crushed them. Seeing the momentum of those tanks with his own eyes, Wang Ling's eyelids twitched, but he was not discouraged at all, but was full of fighting spirit. When the tanks at the front entered his range, he launched electromagnetic currents directly to block these tanks from a long distance. Surrounded by his electric shock, there were two Grizzly tanks, a Phantom tank, and two multi-purpose infantry vehicles. These three types of tank units have different functions, and their health and armor are also very different. A lot, usually not very obvious, but under Wang Ling's attack, the difference became highlighted. After several consecutive electromagnetic attacks, the multifunctional infantry vehicle and the Phantom tank were all destroyed. Only the Grizzly tank was still moving forward, but the health bar on its head dropped as Wang Ling continued to attack, decreasing more and more. Faced with this strong magnetic bombardment, the Grizzly tank tried its best to help other tanks attract firepower. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the tank army finally entered the firepower range of other units of the Wolf team. Ever since, a large-scale battle began.